Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and fellow Forest fan from across the Atlantic. It's Richard Spray. How you doing, buddy? You okay?
I'm great. That's my favorite one yet, man. Well done.
Really?
That's brilliant.
Excellent.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Sorry, we have a few sound problems possibly today, trying to work out a new microphone and new speakers. So if there's anything feeding back, I'm really sorry about that. Today's episode is all about our guest. Yes, we'll get into some Forest chat. Yes, we'll talk about how well we've done so far this season. And yes, we'll be looking ahead to the Liverpool game and the next set of fixtures in the Premier League. But we have with us today someone who we welcome warmly and with friendship into the guest hot seat. He's a man who has built up a huge following on YouTube as the host and leader of Forest Fan TV, someone who has certainly ruffled a few feathers with his channel and content, and a guy who for some reason tends to get a lot of hate from large parts of the Forest fan base. To get into all of that, to pick it apart, and to finally put some of those rumours to bed, Talking Reds is delighted to introduce the one and only Wolfie.
Ooh. Mate, you're wasted on here, mate. You should be in Hollywood with that.
That's what I told him.
Yeah.
Foley artist, man.
I do like my sound effects. I like my little bit of cheese. That's a bit of
I
a
need
trademark.
to buy you for your birthday one of those Rode sound boxes, man. It'd be perfect for you.
My background, I did DJing in the past. I've got like a bit of a DJ background, but so I kind of try and bring some of that into play, and I've done a bit of radio in university, stuff like that. So just for fun, to try and have a few sound effects here and there. Okay, right. Listen, if you are joining us, thank you very much. If you're in the chat, do get your questions in. If you want anything that you'd like us to ask Wolfie, please do let us know. We will get our questions and your questions to him as much as possible. Hit like, hit subscribe, please. It helps us out. Thank you very much again, Wolfie. It was great being on Forest Fan TV for my debut on your channel a week or so ago, and you were ever so gracious in getting a load of people to come and subscribe and find us. And, we are very, very happy that you did that. Thank you. Right, straight into it then, Wolfie. We always ask the question to our guest on the One With. This is the One With Wolfie. What is your Forest story? When, how, and why are you a Nottingham Forest fan? Take it away.
So, I mean, do I go back to the beginning? It's
tell us everything.
My first real memory of football was the 90 World Cup. Do you remember Roger Miller there doing his dancing?
Yep.
Or something? That kind of got me into football, and I liked what I saw. And then, I was a kid then, really young. And then the next real memory I have of my first English game, if you like, was Forest Spurs in the FA Cup final. And obviously we lost, but I liked what I saw. And it's like, why is a team called, Nottingham Forest? And it just built my curiosity up. There's no links with any family members for me, anything like that. There was no loyalties with my parents really to any football thing. They weren't much into it. So I just got into it. You talk it in the playground and what have you. I was born in Scotland, but the majority of my childhood was down south. So my dad's a doctor, so we used to jump around a lot. When you're a junior doctor, you got to do 2 years in different locations. So by the time we started settling down, I just got into football, and it was Forest. I caught the late bit of the Clough era. Unlike the likes of Ant, I never got to see the European football stuff, wasn't even born then. And then really it just developed from there. Most of my childhood was in Bedford, where I grew up. And in the school there was only me and one other Forest fan. The rest were Man United, Spurs, Arsenal, the usual stuff you see. Especially in a place like Bedford, where there's no real team around Bedford, per se. Your nearest ones were like lower league Stevenage, but that was still probably like 30 minutes up the road and what have you. So a lot of people were just attracted to Big Six teams, but I like to be different. And it was about that era where I really started to get into football under the Frank Clark time. And it was it was so you had so much pride in what Forest were doing. You know, you could hold your chest out. We finished third in the league, European football. We'd always beat Spurs. Most of my mates were Spurs fans then. There's a lot of banter going on, but just connecting to the club was extremely hard. I remember back then, obviously, these are like the old days before internet and what have you. I used to just about be able to pick up Century 106, which is one of the stations that was in Nottingham. And you'd have Darren Fletcher actually on there, and I think it was Larry Lloyd doing the commentary. But the reception was so bad, you know, you'd just about be hearing things. But this is like the extents you'd go to just to hear what was going on with Forest. So that was like my main connection. Fletcher's voice really was a lot of it as a kid. And then I was determined that I have to go to Nottingham. So what was my first out from, you know, being a kid? University. So I had to convince my dad, who, as I said, was a doctor. He wanted me, he won't admit to it, but he wanted me to be a doctor as well. I had no interest in it. My only interest was, what course can I get on and can I get to Nottingham? And that's what happened. Convinced my dad. So I moved up to Nottingham in 2001. And literally from there, it was game in, game out. And the beauty of it was you got the NUS card there. So you'd get into the stadium for £10 every single time. It was absolutely fantastic. And, you know, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but once that expired, they still accepted it. So it's a long time. I was paying £10 to get in. And, you know, back then, you could just turn up on the door. There was never really issues getting tickets. Even, I think the playoffs in 2003, we queued up a couple of mornings before when they went on sale. No problems. A lot different to how it is today. So I was in Nottingham for the next 5 or 6 years. And then I met my now-to-be wife. She was living down south in Reading. So I moved down to London, and then we got married shortly afterwards. And then we lived in West London. And then from there, what I'd do, because my mates were still in Nottingham, every couple of weeks, me and my cousin would go up. We'd make a lads' weekend of it, Forest match and golf. They're my two love of lives, you know, outside of my family. So, and with Nottingham, you got like loads of golf courses. So we'd spice it up every week, go to the golf course, check the Forest match out. And that was just a routine, really, until probably when the kids were born. And then COVID hits, and, you know, life slightly changes. And then that kind of brings us up really to the Premier League. And we are where we are. And thank God we are back in it. So most of my childhood really was, the best I saw was us finishing third in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. You know, I know we lost to Bayern, and I know I took a lot of stick in school after I was going on like we were going to win it. But I still say, if the rules were different, boys, we would have been in the Champions League. You know, this whole top four wasn't a top four back then. Yep. But yeah, that was the story. And then obviously now we're in Premier League era, kicked off FFTV. I'm sure we'll get on to that in a minute. It's not the most exciting story, boys. It's just a case of, you know, it was a weirdly named team as a kid that I picked up on and attached to, and then I just fell in love with the players, the manager, the idea of Nottingham. Everything for me was just focused on, I want to be in Nottingham, and I got to live that.
Fantastic. So, straight off the bat, have you ever been a supporter of any other football team apart from Nottingham Forest?
No,
because that's one of the things that
I've seen a few accusations of some interesting clubs, and some of these clubs I detest.
Like Manchester United, maybe not Man United.
Yeah, that would be my number one. Man U and Spurs, because of my mates that I grew around with. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. There's just hatred, and it's a funny accusation. I find it's like, surely if I was a different fan, let's say, I don't know, United fan or something, why would I switch to Forest? It's like, I don't understand. Yeah. In my lifetime, I don't think I've ever met a single person, male, female, who switched teams. I don't think it's something that happens. And if I'm going to switch teams at my age now, what have I been doing for the last, you know, majority of my life?
Yeah, so. I mean, so I think you're hearing you from the horse's mouth. You know, we all come to our team in many different ways. Richard and I inherited it from my dad, Richard from his grandfather, and that's quite often the case. You've clearly, as you say, been attracted to Forest. The name stood out for you. but it's become not just a passive thing. It's become a real thing, and actually trying to get to see games and get up to Nottingham and go to university there deliberately. You know, I think you go to a lot of games. You've been a fan for as long as a lot of people, so I think we can put to bed quite easily and quite clearly. Wolfie is a bona fide Nottingham Forest fan who has supported the club for many, many years and is just as much a fan of the team as I am, as Richard is, as anybody else in the comments. And so hopefully anybody that's watching live that has any doubts or watches this on playback, you know, you've heard it from the horse's mouth, okay? I think one of the accusations that's thrown at you is that you brought it up to date with us coming into the Premier League, is that obviously you've created Forest Fan TV and people are like, oh, where was this guy before? When we were in League One? Where was he then? But the thing is, where were a lot of us? I mean,
I was in the stands, mate. That's
exactly.
You know, and it's back then there wasn't, you know, YouTube and
exactly,
and so even like cameras on your phones, things like that. You couldn't stream anything or what have you. Nor was it even an intention of mine. You know, it was like I was there to see my club, and then as you develop into, you know, becoming an adult, into having a family and stuff, you try and balance how much time you can see Forest to other commitments you have. Like, I now run my boys' football team. I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years, you know, and that would end up some weeks on the days that Forest are playing. So forgive me, there's the odd match I missed, you know, when before they go under 12s, there were Saturday games, you know, so maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what it is. I didn't see every single minute of every single game in the last century. But,
that's right.
You know, it is what it is. But I think, you know, these he wasn't, where was he? It's like, sorry, but if you didn't know me doesn't mean that you weren't a fan or what have you, you know.
Right.
So
indeed, just dipping into the comments so we can catch up with some of those. Forest Fan TV and just wants to make sure that you know that he's got you that t-shirt.
Can we ban this troller? He's my number one hater.
I know. I think it's important that you know, we have had this conversation. Apparently you're a hidden Wolves fan, according to many, from Daniel. That's another
you know, that's I know, and he's trolling, joking trolling, but I do get that one. If there was a team that I'd be accused of, I would understand if people connected Wolves because of the whole Wolverine thing and Wolfie thing. It is completely unrelated, but I mean, I don't know if you guys want to know that bit of it.
Well, I was about to say, where'd that come from?
Yeah, what? So you tell us your if you want to, you can tell us your actual name, which I know what it is. But
well, you know it. But I like to troll my chat because they keep guessing. I told them when we get to 30,000, I'll let them know. But the whole thing of that was ever since I was a kid, and had like an Xbox and what have you. You have your Xbox gamer tag, and my name was Wolverine on there. Nothing to do with Forest or Wolves in that case. And then you end up as that kind of internet generation started to develop and stuff, a lot of people just refer to each other by their gamer tags. And that's all it was. And then it developed into Wolfie really from my chat because they couldn't be bothered to say Wolverine every time. So they just started calling me Wolvie. And then that turned into Wolfie. And I was like, all right, if that's easier for them, then go with it, you know. So again, not that exciting, but that's just really how it developed. And at that time, back like 5-6 years ago, I had a YouTube channel which was just Wolverine. In fact, FFTV started as that channel just because it was live and what have you. And yeah, so that's really as exciting as the name. Yeah, I wish I could tell you there's like some cool story and I met yeah, it was just my gamer tag. And I had the original name Wolverine, which was really hard to get on Xbox. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
go on, Rich.
Oh, I was just gonna say, what about the people that come on that are regular contributors? Like, how did that relationship develop with Ant and Crypto and all those guys and the grumpy old Reds and like that kind of? What's the genesis behind that?
But also, I mean, take us at the same time as answering that, because that's a great question, Richard. Yeah. Just tell us about the birth of FFTV and how that started, and then obviously how you brought these guys on board.
So how it really started was in my job, I used to cover like East Anglia and East London. So I'd be driving around day in, day out, left, right, and centre. Before that, I was working in London, living in Peterborough on the train, back and forth, and what have you. Long days, 8 till 8. It was during COVID, towards the end of COVID, where we had a restructure and they got rid of our team. and then they placed us into other positions. And the position I got was a work from home position, which kind of freed me up. And during that COVID period, there was like promotion work they wanted done internally. And because I had a computer degree, my time in Nottingham, which I hadn't used for like 15 odd years, they were like, why don't you try making us some promo videos and what have you? So I got into like video editing, and obviously I'd done some streaming on FIFA and stuff beforehand. And it just started to develop. And I was there, I was talking to some of my mates about it, and they're like, you're doing this for free for them, man. This costs a lot of money for people to do. People end up putting things like this on YouTube and what have you. You seem to know what you're doing. And I got to grips with it quite quickly. And then it was about the time where we were in that, we were just coming up through Coops, and we got into January, and we were starting to think, shall we dare dream? But this is Forest, memories of the old days and what have you. And I'd settled into my new job for about 6 months, and it ran in line with roughly where the playoffs were. And the playoffs for me was the biggest thing. I hate Sheffield United because of 2003. I nearly, while I was at uni at that time, I nearly lost my job at Capital One because of the game. So I was at the home leg, but then for the away leg, they wouldn't let me have the time off. And I ended up not getting tickets for the away leg, but there was no way I was working. It was like in the call center at Capital One. So you'd work the evening shift from I think it was like 5:30 till 9. So I was going to miss the game. And I was like, screw this, I'm calling in sick. By the way, Dominic, if you're watching, I wasn't really sick. I don't know if he's so I binned it off to go and watch it. We ended up in, was it called the Screen Bar, right next to the Newton building in Nottingham for that 4-2. And that was probably one of my biggest Forest heartaches. After what we did in the first leg, when we scored and then Brown got the penalty and then what have you. So I carried that scar from 2003 until the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And when we got into the play, when we didn't beat Hull, remember when they equalized last minute and it pushed us into fourth? I wanted Luton. I did not want Sheffield United because I was like, it's going to happen again. So I'm babbling on, but the story really here is once we beat Sheffield United, I felt like that scar had gone and had been healed. It had taken that long to heal. I ended up just doing a video, just basically saying my opinions. This was on my Wolverine channel, just like how happy I am. I don't care about the final. Genuinely, I didn't care about the final. I was like, I've got that monkey off my back. And then it just started from there. And really at that time, I was starting to get into YouTube in terms of watching YouTube and stuff. Before that, I'd do a lot of stuff on Twitch. And I was just looking around and there just wasn't the Forest content out there. There was some content, but you look at what Arsenal have, what the big six clubs have on YouTube and everything like that. There wasn't that information hub on what was happening at Forest. So, and with what I'd just been learning at work, I was like, all right, I'll give it a go. Because it was so many times, like in the 2000s, you'd turn up game one of the new season and you didn't really know the new players. Like the connection and understanding who would sign. It wasn't until you were watching them physically that you get to know them and get your opinions about them and their history and what have you. I just felt like, is that still going to happen with our fan base? We've come up from Premier League. We're probably going to sign some, weird and wacky players. Again, with my FIFA background, I had to do a lot of studying on different leagues, on different players, because, this is a whole other discussion if you want to talk about FIFA. So I know a lot of the European leagues and what have you. And then I just started doing these daily news videos that started to take off and people were interested in. I mean, that season we ended up with 22 in the summer we bought. So there was a lot of content to get through. Started doing some watch alongs for the preseason games and it just started growing. And what I loved about it when growing up, as I said to you, there's only one other Forest fan in my school. And I just saw this community growing and you start to realize and understand just how international Forest are and just how disconnected people feel from the actual club just because they're in America, like yourself, Richard, or in Australia. And then you see fans in Indonesia, Africa, all over the place. And it almost became with the watch-alongs, for example, a place where people could feel they were watching the game together, celebrate the goals together, scream together at the same time when something didn't go our way. And that's what really I thought there's something here. Like because I felt it. I'm sure you felt it, Richard, where you as well, Greg, being down in London. I mean, we're not a million miles away from Nottingham. And it just started to build community. And I can see all the comments in there. I know these guys and I feel like I know them personally, you know, just looking in the chat now. And that's what it got to. And for someone as a kid who grew up with no one really around him who supported Forest, this was the key thing for me, is giving that connection to really the international and the Forest and the local Nottingham ones, you know. So that's how it started.
We talked about that as something that we've loved when we've watched other podcasts. That it brings a lot of, it's that community feel.
Yeah.
So it's been really important to me and Richard when we were watching those to kind of interact with other Forest fans. And now we've got Talking Reds, so we empathise with that completely. So Richard was asking you before about how you got the likes of Ant and Crypto involved. So tell us that story.
It's quite interesting because while I was in Nottingham, I knew Ez, but I didn't know him. Like, I probably saw Ez day in, day out. I won't say where he was working, but there was a place he was working there that I saw him day in, day out. And I just remembered him because he had, he'll kill me for saying this, but he dyed his hair like blue and he had like these fake lenses in and stuff. I didn't know him. He was an employee at the establishment. And it wasn't until like when we got started that they were in the chat, really. And they were just Forest fans talking, interacting with me. And then we'd do I started doing like phone-ins and stuff. They'd start talking. We started talking about our backgrounds, and it ended up, me and Ez found out that, you know, we knew each other. There was Ant as well. It was just through the channel, really, was that I started to make these connections with that. And I was like, I want more. I want more. I've missed this out on my childhood. I want to get involved in it. Because even when I went to uni, that it wasn't, my circles weren't Forest fans, because people were coming from Birmingham, from up north and what have you, you know, Villa fans, whatever they were, Man U fans, Arsenal fans. So even while I was in Nottingham, it wasn't like I was connecting with people who were Forest fans, if that makes sense, because you get chucked into dorms when you first go in and what have you. So yeah, because they were there, I just absorbed them, and especially with the different like experience ranges. Like you got Ant, who was alive in the European glory days and before that, such an asset to know about that history, you know, which is before my time. And I use Ant as almost an encyclopedia of old school Forest knowledge. You got Ez, who's around my age, and we have the same scars and the same pains and the same things. And then Crypto as well. And we had Dino, of course, another top bloke. So there was just like a nice feel about it. And at the time, we were struggling in the Premier League, and I was getting frustrated with Cooper. And, you know, I always want, whenever I talk, for it to be an honest chat. I don't want anyone to agree with me or disagree with me. I just want a platform where people can discuss things. And these guys were good speakers whenever they'd come into phone-ins and stuff like that. And that just developed Grumpy Old Reds. Grumpy Old Reds really was just an unfiltered part of FFTV, that where people would come on and say exactly how they were feeling, raw emotion or not. I didn't want a vanilla setting, if that makes sense. I wanted people to be able to come on and feel comfortable to say what they felt. And I wanted that for the chat as well. There was loads of people in the early days who were like, you know, I haven't been able to say this, or I get abused on Twitter if I say this, that, and the other. I can come on here and say it. You guys may not agree with me, or you may agree with me, but at least I feel comfortable to say it. And that's really what I wanted. And I think that kind of helped in the growth of FFTV, that, okay, people don't agree with what we're saying, but they can't take away from the fact that we are saying what we think. You know, so there was a lot of that. Yes, we pushed the lines, but I don't see it any different to when we're at the games. The stuff I hear at games, you know, is worse than gets said on YouTube and what have you, because sometimes I don't think people can disconnect between the raw emotion. You're doing a watch along and someone misses a chance and you call them crap. It doesn't mean you think they're crap. It's just in that heat of that moment, you thought, why didn't you score? It's said more with love than anything else. And yeah, so that's how that came about. And then we developed into what we are now, really. So did the branding change from Wolverine over to FFTV, brought the boys on, and been a roller coaster since, boys. A roller coaster.
So thank you for that. there's a few questions coming into the chat, which we will get to. So keep them coming. I want to just pick the right moment to slot those questions in.
Whenever you want, buddy.
Yeah, well, it's to do with basically at the right point in the story.
Yeah.
Because the next thing I wanted to touch on, if I may, is that, you know, you have received a lot of flack as FFTV. The accusations are that you're just a clickbait channel designed to get maximum clicks and subscribers so you can make a load of money. I mean, how do you respond to that? And then also, let me ask another one to kind of dovetail with that. I mean, Ant and Crypto get their fair share of flack as well from being on FFTV. When Richard and I set up Talking Reds, we were chatting, and I said, look, I'm all for controversial characters and controversial opinions, but as long as someone can back it up. And my experience of getting some flack myself was I'd appeared on Forest Focus a couple of times, and it largely, you know, seemed to have resonated and gone down well. But ultimately, when you look back at comments on YouTube, there was some flack coming my way because I was quite passionate and I got into Nuno a little bit after the Brighton game.
I think it was. Yeah. And I think you said Nuno out, and
and I was prepared to say, look, you know, I was passionate, and people, and then we don't want Greg on again. Get him, he's, you know. And I thought, okay, fair enough, that's fine. But I thought there's got to be a place where people can say what they want to say, and it's debated rather than just shut down completely. Because I think that's the wrong thing. So that's why I really celebrate having that unfiltered moment or that unfiltered platform for people to be able to, Grumpy Old Men's, for example, to do that. So how do you respond to people saying that you're just a clickbait channel? And, you know, the other thing as well I want you to talk about is that social media and X in particular is a human zoo full of that horrible spite. And I've seen the same people chucking abuse your way. So how does it affect you? How do you deal with it? I mean, how are you, first and foremost? I hope you seem like you can deal with it well. You know, in terms of a mental health capacity, how much does it affect your mental health, mate?
Not at all, to be honest. I'll be honest with you. There's as you said on Twitter or X, whatever it's called. It's its own species, if you like. Our main focus is YouTube, and on YouTube, honestly, 99.9% nothing but love, because I think people understand what we're trying to do on that platform. We are trying to give the Forest fans a platform to meet each other and a platform to say and do how they feel within reason. You know, you don't want people chucking in racism or anything like that. So there are limits as things go. In terms of the abuse stuff and what have you, honestly, I love it. I actually love it because it cracks me up. One, I don't actually see a lot of it. I usually get someone will send me something on WhatsApp saying, "Oh my God, have you seen what they've said today about you?" Or, "You know, they've taken this out of context," and what have you. And I just think to myself, if you're that sad, either you're obsessed with FFTV, or you are, you know, potentially maybe jealous of the growth we've had in 2 years, or you just really dislike me. But you seem to have an opinion on me. And I find that more of praise than anything. You know, people are prepared to have an opinion on what I'm saying. And who am I? I'm just a kid that grew up supporting Forest, who will never say that my chat will say I always say I'm always right. But, you know, my opinions are my opinions. Then my opinions will not change how Forest play. They will not change where we finish in the league. If I want to dream of Forest finishing in the top 4, who is anyone to tell me I can't, you know? But at the same time, there's some people who will flip whatever you say to whatever way. So if I was to say Forest will win the league, I'll be called deluded. If I say Forest are going to be relegated, I'll be called negative and you hate the club and you don't support Forest and what have you. So you're never going to win. I just don't have time, to be honest, to check up on all that stuff because I'm running FFTV. I have a full-time job, 3 kids and a wife. With all the normal stuff us normal guys, as you guys will have as well, have to deal with. So any spare time I have is dedicated to my family and to getting some sleep, if I'm being honest with you. You know, so I don't have time for that. I find it entertaining. And I think to myself, if the best accusation you can come up against me is I've been a fan for 2 years or whatever they claim is, then you're really struggling to find something to hold against me. In terms of calling stuff clickbait and what have you, that's subjective as far as I'm concerned. Everything we put in our titles and in our thumbnails is discussed in the video. So define to me what is clickbait. You know, I don't do the thumbnails. I have someone who does thumbnails for me and the descriptions and the titles. So maybe I need a new thumbnail manager, but I quite like our thumbnails, the design of them and what have you. So anything that we do there is really based on what the video is about, you know? So
I think some of the stuff that goes out on X, you get a lot of replies on X/Twitter to some of the stuff you put out there. And it feels like anything you suggest with an open question, you're automatically getting a barrage of abuse, an embarrassment of a forest channel. Some people say, you know, I've seen some abuse coming from particular people, and I think it's a little bit salty. It feels like a lot of envy, if I'm honest with you. I mean, you put out something about an hour and a half ago about the shipping containers that have gone up in the corner, and you put out, what do people do? Does anybody like this? Do people like this? And it's a straightforward question. I mean, we'll perhaps get to that later, but some people might say that you're just baiting people, trying to get negative comments coming back in. How do you respond to that?
I mean, it's, you know, the example I'll give you is Sangare. Like, I've backed Sangare since he's come in. I've been told that because I've backed Sangare, it's because FFTV have some kind of commission off Sangare. I've seen stuff like that because we were involved, obviously, when he got signed, which got nothing to do with why I like Sangare. So if I'm defending a player who hasn't had a great season, I should be criticizing him. If I'm putting, or we're putting posts out, and again, I don't really get involved in the social media stuff. I'll deal on social media, I'll talk to people we follow, DMs and things like that. But we have people that manage our social media. So I don't know who these people think. Then maybe they think they're directly talking to me in instances. I don't know, but I don't really get to see it. So when they're talking about these weird and wacky things they come up with, what you said there, Greg, was, you know, spot on. I saw a post a week or two ago where we'd just done a Grumpy Old Reds, and the chat were talking about dropping Morgan Gibbs-White, the chat. And we love to interact with our chat. So when I saw there was quite a few saying drop MGW, I was like, guys, really? I was like, okay, let's put a poll up. So put a poll up, would people drop Morgan Gibbs-White? And then we all had our say, I think almost unanimously across the panel. Everyone's like, we can't drop him. He's our most talented player, blah, blah, blah. And then there were posts going up on X saying, the FFTV now want to drop Morgan Gibbs-White and what have you. Completely taken out of context, because, again, it goes to one of our core principles that if the chat want to talk about it, we're not going to shy away from talking about it. If that's what they want to hear, they're the audience. They're the ones we care about. And I was like, when I saw that post, I was like, that's completely maliciously done. To try and a lot of people try and use FFTV to gain clout for themselves, I feel, at points. Yes. And if they want to do that, cool. But I'm not interested in that kind of engagement. I have always said, and Greg, I'm sure you'll back me up on this, I want more Forest content on there. I can't stand the sound of my own voice. Yeah. When you guys first started, I was like telling our chat, go subscribe to them. I'm really good mates with Matt and Chris from Forest All Over.
Yeah, great guys.
I've been forcing them for the last year to get on YouTube because I want to watch their content, not just on Spotify. You know, I want more content. YouTube is the biggest platform on the internet for videos. There is so much space on YouTube for another 100 Forest channels to put good content out there. So that I don't want to watch FFTV because I know what's going to be said. I bloody recorded a lot of it. And that's the thing with me. And I think people would be better off working together, creating, you know, content together, sharing the base, making sure that everyone knows about every other channel that's going on there, and get on with it. Because at the end of the day, the bottom line is you're a red, I'm a red. Yeah. Just because our opinions may vary, what changes? You know, Forest will still go out and play at 3 o'clock on Saturday. We're not going to change that. And, you know, if I'm being honest, this all boils down to one subject, Steve Cooper. That's what it boils down to. Because I was the first to turn on Cooper. And there was a huge, huge portion of the fan base that hated it. And I have no problem with them hating it, but it was my opinion. And
Yeah.
I think that's what it all boils down to.
So what about? Oh, go ahead, Greg.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what about? I've got 3 teenagers at home. So did they get into what you're doing on social media? Do they have any interaction with that? Because I can only imagine if I was getting the same kind of flack, my kids would be pretty upset and probably bring it to me because they see things in a much more rapid pace than I do, right? Because they're so locked in to all forms of social media. Does that happen with you? Because you're just a regular guy. You're like you said, you're a dad, you're a husband, you got a job.
Yeah, not really. I mean, that's part of the reason I've decided to separate my name from my online name is because, like I said, my kids are at that age now, 15, 13, and 6, where they're interacting in it. So, abuse me all you want. It doesn't affect me in the slightest. I've gone through a lot worse in my lifetime. So it doesn't bother me. But my boys, one's an Arsenal fan, diehard Arsenal fan, and the other's a Man City fan. And he's like into football, but not as into football as my youngest. But they don't really spin in the Forest world, I tried my best, but I didn't want to force them into it. When they were born and coming to that age of football, we were so shocking on the pitch that when I took them, they almost fell asleep, So I couldn't force them into it. And they, my youngest got attracted into Arsenal, and I said to him, as long as it's not Derby or Manchester United or Spurs, do what you want, So I let him go free. But in terms of the online stuff, they don't really see it. If they do, they don't tell me about it, but it doesn't impact us. Like I said, they don't spend too much time on Twitter. I think kids are more on Snapchat or something these days. I don't know.
In the comments, then, Danscape, regular contributor, says you're only a proper fan if you stay to the end of Forest 1, Manchester United 8. Daniel, he wants to say something as well. He says if Wolfie wasn't a Forest fan, he wouldn't be as dedicated to Forest as he is on Forest Fan TV. Daily uploads and usually at least one weekly stream. Absolutely right. Also, Ian, I live in Canada and I get accused of not being a proper Forest fan as I don't get so many games. It's a day's flight, for Christ's sake, not to mention the cost. Here, Ian.
Can I just comment on that, if you don't mind? Greg?
Yeah, of course.
And that, I would say I get more insulted about the indirect inference people have for someone who doesn't go to a match or what have you. Who is anyone to judge who is a bigger Forest fan than the other?
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, if you support Forest, you're as loyal a fan as the next person standing up. Who knows the person's personal circumstances? Who knows their health circumstances? Who knows their financial circumstances? And the capacity on City Ground can only hold up to just about 30,000. Does that mean that anyone who's out of those 30,000 are not Forest fans? It baffles me, and I find it more insulting for the likes of Ian and the others who would dream of coming to England to watch one match. I would prefer if those who are lucky enough to get in week in, week out would just come out and say, I'm privileged. I'm privileged that I have the honor to go week in, week out, and leave it at that. Why judge who's a bigger fan than the other? Unless there's some book that can explain to you there's rules which I've missed. How is that judgment made?
Indeed. And Ian follows up with saying his boy was a Chelsea fan until he was told that he hoped he'd be comfortable sleeping in the garage. Here. I mean, that's one way to deal with it for certain. There was one question I wanted to get to in the comments that we kind of touched on, sort of the mental health aspects and the kind of, how much abuse can affect you. David was asking, with the potential for your content to shape public opinion, how do you differentiate between fair analysis and content that may unintentionally fuel negativity or harassment? I mean, does that come into your thinking that, there's going to be a fair amount of flack coming to you when you have a certain opinion? I mean, do you ever ramp it up deliberately, or are you always just cold as ice? This is how I feel. Whether it's taken rightly or wrongly, it is what it is. Is your content there to try and influence others, or are you just giving a platform to people to share their personal opinion?
I think there's certain aspects of our content which people should take with a bit more pinch of salt than others. And I'd say that's player ratings, because that's literally after a match. If we've lost, obviously I'm upset. Obviously I may call someone I love on the team rubbish that game or whatever. Yeah, that's just a raw opinion. Have I had a rethink about how to approach these things? In a way, yes, because not much though, not much. It's a case of more so because I got messages from parents saying our kids love watching your channel. Please cut down on the swearing. So, you know, in terms of language being used, that's where we've kind of set guidelines. So Grumpy Old Reds is still classed as R18 and over stream, where it's free to do so. But in the daily videos, it'll be very rare that I chuck in an S-bomb or an F-bomb or something like that. Because again, like everyone has my WhatsApp number, it's on all the videos, and I'm interacting with Forest fans day in, day out. And we're always asking, what do you guys want to see? Not this is what you're going to watch. So we have a lot of feedback from the fan base to tell us what they want, rather than, you know, us enforcing what we want. So now I'd say the only thing we've softened up on is language during the pre-recorded daily videos and things like that. And just so parents have a better guideline, because, and I understand it, when you reflect on it and understand it, there's certain things I don't want my kids watching, you know? And if this is a platform where children are starting to get their Forest news, for example, then it needs to be respectful towards what they should be subject to, as well as what their parents' intentions are. That's really where we've changed. But apart from that, no, the opinions and everything are just honest. They're not playing to a crowd or anything like that. It's just mates in a pub talking football.
Yeah.
Okay. Going to move on very shortly, but just want to add a few more comments in before we do. Anne is saying, you know, I live 10 minutes from the city ground. He says, very lucky to be able to attend every Forest home game. If he lived abroad, he wouldn't be able to. That wouldn't make him less of a fan, you know, and we agree with that wholeheartedly.
It's not even abroad, Greg. Is it live south, live up north?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, precisely. I want to just quickly add in that the England team has been released. Gibbs White does not start. He is on the bench. I'm surprised at that. I thought he would be starting. I'll quickly give you the team. I'm not going to spend too much on this, but Pickford in goal. Looks like a back four of Alexander-Arnold at right back, Colwill left back, Maguire and Guehi centre backs. Then it looks like a two of Kobe Mainu with Declan Rice. And then you've got a wide players of Gordon left, Saka right. It looks like Kane's up top. Saka. Oh, you got Saka, Gordon and Saka, Gordon and Grealish. Grealish. Looks like Grealish in the 10. Sorry, they don't lay it out in a formation. Gibbs White, I thought would start, but anyway, listen, we perhaps will get onto him shortly. But look, just to wrap up this segment, we've talked for nearly 45 minutes, and I think we could probably talk for another 45 minutes.
Sorry, boys.
You know, no, not at all. Not at all. This is why you're here. We wanted you to have a chance to kind of speak and people to listen and hear what you got to say. Ultimately, you know, my mantra is you judge people on how they are with you, and you've been nothing more than a gracious, brilliant bloke to us since we started, and we can't thank you enough for that. And I think all Forest fans need to kind of pull their head out their asses a little bit sometimes and understand that we're all on the same team. We've all got different opinions. I see one or two people from other podcasts giving you grief, which I find ridiculous. And I think a lot of it is built on envy. So I say to those people out there, concentrate on your own podcast. Concentrate on getting your content out that you want to deliver and interacting with your audience. You're more than welcome, any of you, to come onto this podcast and sit and say what you want to say. But, you know, it's very easy to hide behind your keyboard on X and on Twitter and throw F-bombs and C-bombs at people and start calling people for being this and for being that. But ultimately, Wolfie, we've got your back. We think you're a good bloke. We encourage people to support you. And ultimately, Forest Fan TV has got over 20,000 subscribers. We are at the infancy of our podcast with not even 700 yet. And you've certainly helped us get up to where we are at the moment. So like and subscribe our podcast if you're listening and watching. We hope you can do that. But ultimately, Wolfie, we're going to move on and get into some Forest chat. And, you know, keep your questions coming in the comments. And if we've got time, we'll try and chuck a few more his way.
Sound, love it. Love it.
Okay, right. So let's get your personal all-time Forest 11.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Now, we don't have the graphics that you've got in your fancy show. We are still
Shout out to Nottingham Trent Uni, mate.
Yeah, we're still using good old-fashioned lineup builder. But here is your team. Wolfie's red. So I'm going to read it out so anyone listening can hear it. In goal, you've gone for Brice Samba. You've gone for a back four. Left back, Stuart Pearce. Right back, Jed Spence. Centre back partnership of Colin Cooper and Michael Dawson. You've got all out attack. Now, I don't know who's holding that midfield, but you've got a midfield of Ian Wone on the left, Steve Stone on the right, and then through the middle, you've got Lars Bohinen and Brian Roy. And then behind, sorry, I beg your pardon, up top, Stan Collymore, Pierre Van Hooijdonk. I always say to guests, look, it's your Forest team. It's your 11 that you feel passionate about. So you tell us why you picked. I mean, we haven't got time to go through every single position. But pull out, for example, you put Lars Bohinen in there, for example. You put Jed Spence in there. You put Van Hooijdonk in there. Why have you picked the players you picked, Wolfie?
So, like, there's players in there who I've just got... Like, I could have picked the Frank Clark starting at 11. Like, for me, that's still one of the best teams I've seen in my lifetime. So it's heavily influenced by that era, if I'm being honest with you. Like, Ian Wone, I was close to putting Andy Reid in, but because he went to Spurs, he broke my heart. So he couldn't go in, right? So, but it was close. But Ian Wone scored those free kicks against Spurs in the FA Cup, and I got absolute, like, I could give pelters to my mates. So Ian Wone had to go in for his free kicks. Brian Roy is my all-time favourite player, so he had to go in somewhere in there. Lars Bohinen was one of the most skillful players I've ever seen at Forest. And he's the first person I'd ever seen to score directly from a corner, and he just had to go in for there. And Steve Stone, I think if any Forest fan doesn't respect what he did for Forest, you know, sticking with us, his work rates, his ethic down the right, unbelievable. In terms of my back two, I love Colin Cooper. He was just a born leader for me. I was very close to putting Chesil in alongside him, but Dawson shares the same birthday as me, so I like Dawson a lot. The other one I would have considered, I mean, Des Walker, I didn't really see prime Des Walker. Most of my memories are the second rendition of him. Yep. And Stuart Pearce is just Stuart Pearce. I guess the one controversial one is Van Hooijdonk. But I have never seen anyone take free kicks like he could and dead balls. He was just out of this world. And I think selling Kevin Campbell is one of the biggest mistakes we ever made in our history. Well, that's why we had a team that was ready for the Premier League. And then Collymore, I mean, who needs to say anything about him? The position at right back, Spence I loved in our promotion season. Maybe Matt Cash, maybe Des Little, I would have potentially thought about, but just the way Spence linked up with Jono that season puts him straight in. And in goal, it was between, for me, Samba and Crosley. I'm not old enough for Shilton, mate. This is my lifetime. That's what I'm saying. So it was between, like, I feel we haven't been great historically in my time in the goalkeeping position. So it was between Samba, Crosley, maybe Lee Camp would have been the three at the top of my pile. But Samba, because of what he did against Sheffield United, had to take it for me. So yeah, that's why. Who holds the line? Who holds midfield? Greg, I have no idea, mate. But I would love to see that team play. I would love to see it.
Well, Brian Roy and Lars Bohinen basically would put. I mean, Bohinen wore the number 9. I know he was a midfielder, but yeah I mean, listen, we always say it's your team. You pick based on your, experiences as a Forest fan. Who are we to say anything other than we love it? It's a great side. I can't criticize any player because I know. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to remember Des Walker the first time round. I'm a bit older than you,
me too.
So he would be in my team, but you can't argue with Coops and Dawson at all. So thank you very much for putting that together as well. Moving on, going to take a quick interlude. If you're watching, you're going to see some nice cheese. If you're listening, there'll be some nice music for you. Okay, so that is the Cheese Trader. Stu Freestone sponsors our channel. He is the man in York, the Forest fan. So remember that, guys. If you fancy some specialty cheeses, you can order online. You can get next day delivery, £10 postage only. The card is on the screen. We'll put the rest of the details in the bio. You can get 10% off when quoting Talking Reds, ordering via email, phone, or Instagram. So please do support Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader, fellow Forest fan and friend of the show. All right, so let's get ourselves moving forwards. We're fast approaching the hour mark. We're going to probably end up going slightly over, which is fine. But let's get into some Forest chat. You're here, Wolfie, and we're a Nottingham Forest podcast. What are your thoughts, mate, on the first 3 games so far? How do you sum up the start we've had, Wolfie?
I'm happily disappointed. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm happy we're undefeated. Happy we got 5 points on the board. But there is that inner thought in the back of my head saying we could be on 9. We haven't been behind for a single minute in any game this season so far. We were 3 minutes from the 3 points against Bournemouth. And if not for a worldie against Wolves, we would have won that game. So happily disappointed, and I mean that in a positive framing of the phrase, it is where I am. I do now look ahead to what we've got coming up and think, will we regret those slight misses? You know, you could technically say we've dropped 4 points from winning positions, which is one of the issues we've had over the last year or two in the Premier League. I think we won't. I think we'll be positive. I think we'll keep pushing up the table. I think, you know, there are good things ahead for us, but I do worry that we didn't get a striker in the window. That for me still rings an alarm bell.
Okay. Richard?
Yeah, I'm with you on that as well. I mean, I think it's one of those situations where I go, oh my gosh, what opportunities we created, because when you look at the number of shots, when you look at the number of the possession stats, I mean, everything speaks to the fact that we've progressed as a team. I think just in terms of depth and the kind of players we have and some of the, you know, progression we've seen just from players that were already there. Hopefully we see even more from Gibbs White, because I know he's got more in the tank. But at the same time, if you put it in context, just like you mentioned, Wolfie, with what's on the horizon, can we win a match at Anfield? Unlikely, but it's possible. We played them close majority of the time that we've been in the Premier League, other than the first season. So I think there's opportunities there still. And if we can convert some of these things, if we can get a Ward-Prowse in to potentially give us that slight edge when it comes to set pieces and free kicks and things of that nature, who knows, right? Anything can happen. We've played stout defense to this point. We've at least not given up a set piece goal in the first 3 matches, which is definitely an advancement from where we were in the previous 2 seasons, especially last year. So I'm with you. I think we definitely look at it as like a bittersweet moment, because clearly we could have been in a much better position. Even 7, I think, would be a huge leap for us and a great position to be in, leading into a little bit more difficult portion of the schedule. Now, granted, right after that, we're playing like Leicester, I think, as well. So there is going to be some other matches we can potentially get some points after with this little stretch run that's a little bit more challenging. But, you know, as we've talked about on our podcast and so forth, we've talked about how well we played at Stamford Bridge. So the opportunities are still there. It's not like it's impossible, but it definitely puts a strain on us compared to what we could have had we taken the 3 points at Wolves, for example, which I personally would have been happy about being there. But yeah, go ahead, Simon.
I just feel like we're about to click. I don't know if that's just me being silly or not. I feel if we click, we're going to click. You know, and I just feel we're on that cusp. I don't know if you guys share that same feeling, but that's where I am with it right now.
Well, look at Anderson. I mean, if Anderson can add goals to that repertoire of what he does already and what he's already shown in the first 3 matches, I mean, and the pressure that puts on a team to have someone like him and Gibbs White in the middle, I mean, who are you going to focus on, right? And then if we can somehow get a little bit more advanced play on the wing, because Ina's been all right, but he hasn't been Ina, right? He doesn't seem to have that chemistry in the first 3 matches that he did with Callum. So Callum's getting double teamed. He's not having a chance to really get a good shot at goal like he has been in the past. I mean, obviously people have seen him play, so they know what his tendencies are, so they're going to play against that. But at the same time, I'm with you. I think we're right there in a better position than we've ever been, I think, to really put pressure on teams. But we played really good teams in the Premier League well last season. We just couldn't seemingly get one of those shockers, you know, and get that 3 points again against one of those top 5, 6 teams.
Does that worry you as well, Richard? with all the scars we've had, how many times have we been right there and
I
then
know.
forest to a forest? That's my worry.
I don't disagree with you. It could go that direction as well. I mean, we've seen a bit of that in the first three, like you mentioned. But I'm with you. I have a positive attitude that it's gonna turn. We're gonna get that final third, those last opportunities in that final third will come. Hopefully. And Wood's looked great. I thought he looked phenomenal against Wolves.
This time last year, we went into the international break on 3 points. This time around 5 points. So the progression is there. We talked about cutting out set piece goals to a certain degree, to a certain percentile, was going to automatically reduce the points that we lost last season. So if we're going to take the 3 games in isolation, then you can see the progression is there. I agree. Clicking, it feels like it's just a moment away. Who stood out for you, Wolfie? I mean, that's the first kind of part of the question. And with the addition of James Ward-Prowse, the midfield seems quite loaded now. What or who should be the preferred combination going forwards?
Oof, that's a tough question, mate. I mean, the first one's quite easy. I think it's Anderson. For me, Anderson's hit the ground running. He looks like he's already put his name on that number 8 shirt for me. And he actually wears the number 8, doesn't he? But you know what I mean. And I think the Milenkovic coming in has been sensational. He's just going unnoticed for me, and that's what I want from my centre back. I want to get to the end of the game and think, I didn't notice him. He hasn't made a mistake. He hasn't done anything. He's been calm, composed. So I really like Milenkovic coming in. Who else? Sangare's been a lot better. I think he was better in pre-season than he has been in the last game against Wolves. But I think he's been fantastic. And I really detest the agendas that are there against Sangare because of his 30 million price tag. Let's take it into perspective. We're in the Premier League. 30 million buys you nothing these days.
I said that. Any player that's in kind of the top percentage in their position, left back, right back, whatever, you're going to be paying, I think, at least 30 million, no matter who they are. So,
Greg, look at that position, Greg. Look at that position. Chelsea paid over 100 million for Caicedo, 65 million for Lavia. Rice was over 100 million. The number 6 position is becoming one of the most important positions on the pitch. So 30 million, in contrast to what other teams have paid, it is nothing. Yeah. I think we still have championship mindset on prices. That makes sense. Like, 2 million back then was huge. Now we're talking 30 is unreal. So they're the ones that stuck out for me. In terms of the combo, boys, I haven't got a clue. I'll be honest with you, I've not got a clue. Did a video today putting out some combos. I don't know if Ward-Prowse can get in. Like, who do you drop for him? You can't drop Anderson. He's been phenomenal. You can't really drop Morgan Gibbs-White because he's Morgan Gibbs-White. And Ward-Prowse isn't a 6 for me. So I think maybe we might see Nuno tinkering with some formations. Maybe he goes a 4-3-1-2, but then you're going to have to drop Hudson-Odoi and the other winger on the other side to accommodate for that. So I think Nuno's got a massive dilemma and a massive headache, but I think it's a good one. Let's not, make it a negative. It's a positive. How does he fit these in? That's now for him. He's on the money for it to figure it out. My answer is, boys, honestly, I have no clue.
I think it's going to be horses for courses. I think if I can chuck my own opinion in quickly,
yes,
I think you'll see different formations per opposition. So Richard in our WhatsApp chat put out an interesting sort of selection, possibly for the Liverpool game or for possibly when we revert to going 3 at the back. And that was effectively losing both wingers and going with, 3 centre-backs, progressive wing-backs in maybe Moreno and Aina. And then you're going to be stacking in midfield, and James Ward-Prowse comes into there, and you playing in that kind of manner. So I think it will be a case of horses for courses. But Richard, are we going to, regardless of all of the midfield conundrums, and regardless of the formation selection dilemmas, are we going to rue not getting a striker through the door? The window closed. Hwang Wee-Joy has left the club. That it looked like his contract was cancelled or bought out or whatever last Friday. Free agent, goes back to the Turkish club he was out on loan last season. There's some spaces in the squad in terms of numbers. Are we going to possibly look into the free agent market, or do you think, Richard, that Nuno's just going to stick with what he's got? And is he going to come back to bite us not having that backup striker to Wood and Awonyi?
If you believe what is said in The Athletic, I think it was them who said that. I don't know if it was Daniel Taylor. Somebody reported that Nuno basically said, "I'm good. I don't need another one." As he was closing the window, right? Because clearly we didn't want to just, and you've said this, Greg. Others have said this. We didn't want to just jump to bringing someone in for the sake of filling a position and feeling like we have more depth. Because if we saw with Origi, that didn't help us. That didn't make us a better team last season, and so. I am concerned, like I'm sure Wolfie's concerned, because we know the history with Taiwo. That's evident. So once something happens to him, if heaven forbid, something happens to Wood, you're really in a serious dire straits. Basically, I do agree with you, Greg. I think there's players on the pitch who could fill into sort of a pseudo or false nine role and be effective to a degree, but that's not what we typically do. Jota. Yes. So, I mean, Morgan's done that as well. He did that for under 21 England team, right? He played a false nine and actually did pretty well. So it's not impossible. It's just, I think what it does is it takes away from what has been building and developing in terms of how we manage our formation. I'm with you, Wolfie. I wish we could have gotten someone that was either going to be a developmental striker or something like, and look, I'll probably get stick for this, but I didn't mind Ribeiro. I thought he had talent. It was just, for whatever reason, it didn't seem to work out, or he didn't get favored, he didn't get enough time. So, but someone like that wouldn't have been terrible either, because even if he has to come in at certain points, you're hoping he's just coming in to slowly progress towards becoming a full-time player, because we know, and I keep saying this, Wood's on the last year of his deal. He's getting a little bit older, and we know what's the situation with Taiwo. I think a full fit Taiwo, as everybody has said, alleviates the worry, but that's such a big caveat and such a big if. So yeah, I'm still concerned, because it can easily go south very quickly, and then we're really in a difficult situation.
I agree. I think that we're potentially an injury away from a problem.
Yeah.
If Wood or Wanye pick up something, that's a potential for us feeling like, we could be coming unstuck a little bit. But ultimately, we have to trust in Nuno and see where it takes us. So we've gone past the hour mark. I am keen to move this along swiftly and making sure that we can squeeze in one last thing before we go. So that means it's time for this.
The lightning round!
Yes, sir.
Richard.
You've already been on the hot seat, mate, but we're just gonna run through these quickly, close it out. Yep.
Even more, yeah.
There we go, buddy. What was your first match live?
Bradford 1-0 to Forest. JJ scored.
How long ago was that?
2001.
2001. Wow, yeah.
Long time ago.
Favorite Forest player of all time?
Brian Roy.
Yep. Excellent. Brilliant.
Do you want quick answers on this? Yeah. Lightning answer. Yeah. Okay.
Let's go. What player in Forest history would you like to see on the current squad?
Stan Collymore. I actually think he's fit enough as he is now to get in the team.
He probably could.
Really, right.
Yeah, absolutely. Your favorite away or third kit?
Maybe a little controversial, but do you remember the black kit with the gold stripes in the 4 era? I love. Apart from the sponsor, I love that kit.
I was going to wear that today. Actually, I had it on the hanger. I thought, what should I wear? That one or that one? I went with the.
That's up there as probably one of my apart from the sponsor. But
yeah, that's Stu's favorite actually. Stu Freestones.
Yeah.
What is your favorite Forest moment or memory?
I mean, it's cliche, but it's the Sheffield United semi-final. For me, that and also beating Man U last year because I hate them. As someone said in the comments, 8-1 and all that. So yeah, those would be my favorite moments.
So we've kind of dispelled some rumors about this, but what if you weren't a Forest fan? What club would you support?
Oh, this you could be careful what you say here, because it's all say something.
It could be clipped all over the place.
That's right.
Honestly, I've never thought about it. I would say that whoever playing against Man U or Spurs, or Zidane's my favorite player of all time. So if it was around that time, whoever he was playing for. In terms of in England, I don't know. I was born in Scotland. I think the nearest place to where I was born was Hearts. So should I say, oh, that's not England, that's Scotland.
Oh,
Hearts.
it can be any club.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be
anyway.
an English
Yeah.
club.
Hearts. Then if
There we go.
Brilliant.
Perfect.
Excellent. Apart from Cloughie or Cooper, who was your favorite Forest manager?
without a shadow of a doubt, Frank Clark.
Nice.
And then
Yeah, he got fired when we were in 8th.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
the days.
If Forest could sign one player from a non-Tom Six side, who would it be?
Oh. Oof. Good question. Non top six is in the cartel six, or as it currently
Yeah,
stands.
so
Yeah.
the likes of Palace or Brighton, your traditional top
Wolves,
six, you know about
Bournemouth.
Wolves, Bournemouth. Yeah.
I would have taken Evan Nielsen, the striker that Bournemouth got ahead of us. He's a good
Okay.
player. Or Semedo. I really rate Semedo from
Yeah,
Bournemouth.
Tomato's good, yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
Who would you rather sell first, Murillo or Morgan Gibbs-White?
You guys are gonna hate me, Morgan Gibbs White. I love
That's
Morgan
alright.
Gibbs White. He was my favorite player until Einar came in. But I just feel with our midfield options, we can just about survive. Murillo needs to stay for another year, and then he will be worth huge bucks for Forest. I'd sell neither, but yeah, if you had a gun to my head, I'd go Morgan Gibbs White first.
Excellent. Forest win the Premier League, but are then relegated into the Championship for the next 25 years. Would you take it?
No. Hey, these are horrible questions, Richard, man. You want us to go.
You can blame Greg for that one. That's his
those
one.
23 years of pain again. I mean, that's better suited for a Leicester fan because they lived it.
That's true. That's true. They are the,
Good
the
questions,
parachute
good
team.
questions.
Yeah. Excellent.
Would you take
Thank
it?
you, buddy.
So, was that a yes or a no? I'm not sure.
No. No. Maybe.
Maybe. It's a maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, if you cut that time in half, I'd say yes.
We hope that you have enjoyed watching us and you will like and subscribe and get involved in coming back in future episodes. It really helps the numbers, as you know. So hit the button and come and pay us a visit again. You can listen on Apple and Spotify as well. And leaving a nice review really helps us on those platforms too. So that just about brings us to the end. I can't thank you enough for coming on to join us, Wolfie.
I can't thank you enough for inviting me, mate.
I think we'll have you back on it. I mean, there's loads we could have got into even more. So at some point down the line, we'll have a Wolfie part 2, I'm sure. But the floor is yours to say whatever you want to say before we depart. Over to you, mate.
I just want to thank you both. I think you guys are doing an amazing job on this platform. Thank you for the times you do it as well, because it's when I'm doing my emails at work. So Richard, fair play to you for getting up at the time you get up, mate. So thank you. I just want to, my final message here is let's just remember who we all support. So what if we disagree or agree on whatever point it is? Let's remember the end goal is all the same. We want what's best for Forest, and let's keep raising Forest profile on these social media platforms, on YouTube, on everything else. It's what we want. We need content so the fans can watch us. So boys, I need more content from you. So stop slacking off.
Well,
we're working on that. We're working on it.
These episodes, the one with, I think, is our bread and butter. We've got some more episodes coming up. We're going to have Holly and Ollie from the new Forest Women Fancast podcast coming on. We're going to have other people as well. We're going to be dipping into the fan base. We want to hear from all different types of people, whether they've been a supporter for 25 years or 1 year or for whatever. This is the place to come and have a chat with us, take part in the lightning round, give us your favorite Forest 11 and just have a bit of Forest chat. Richard, thank you very much. Over in Oklahoma, as ever, my co-host. With this time last week, we were just finishing off watching Forest at Wolves. Now you're settled back into life, back over the pond. Enjoy the rest of your weekend over there, buddy.
Thank you, buddy. Yeah, it was great. Hey, Wolfie, pleasure. Absolute pleasure,
My
mate.
pleasure, mate.
So if you've joined us for the first time, welcome. We hope that you will come back and see us again. For those that have been here before, thanks for watching again. One or two familiar faces and names in the chat. This is Talking Reds, and we'll see you on the next one.